It's No Shave November on College Football Insiders. Who's with me? Who's with me? All right, I'm Joel Odom in the bottom corner along with John Canzano and Ken Goe. Guys, Pete Carroll's USC teams are 27-0 in November. Unfortunately for the Trojans, their matchup with Oregon fell on the last day of October. And the Ducks took advantage of Fright Night at Autzen Stadium to blow out USC 47-20. Jeremiah Masoli and LaMichael James had their way with the Trojans. So now the talk has been all about where the Ducks should be in the polls and the BCS. You guys don't have official votes, but where do you rank the Ducks? And do you put them ahead of Boise State, and why?
I would like to see the Ducks play Florida. I mean, if we're just talking about dream matchups, I'd like to see that game today. I'd pay to see it. I talked with Jerry Palm of collegerpi.com yesterday, and he's one of the BCS guys who studies the formula. He says that if Oregon wins out and everybody else wins out, they're going to leapfrog Boise State. They're going to leapfrog TCU. They're going to leapfrog Cincinnati. For Oregon to get that Florida matchup that I'd like to see, and let's forget about where they should be. They're going to need help from Alabama losing. They're going to need help from Texas losing. They're going to need help from Iowa losing. One or two of those things might happen, not all three. But I'm just excited about where Oregon is and that we all have something exciting to talk about.
This is what's wrong with college football. I mean, he would like to see a Florida-Oregon matchup. Well, great. I mean, what do you do with Texas? Texas is pretty darn good, and at this point, I would think Texas may be the best team in the country. But that's my opinion. That's his opinion. All we're dealing with is opinions, and the opinions of the poll voters and the guys that draw up computer programs are more important than the games that are played on the field. Boise State beat Oregon head-to-head. That should matter. It shouldn't matter what Jerry Palm thinks. It shouldn't matter what Joe Schmo, who has a ballot from Cedar Rapids, thinks. It ought to matter what happens on the field. And the only fair way to determine a national champion in college football and to determine a postseason is to play it on the field.
And I don't think we've always agreed on this, but the more that I know why the BCS is what it is. I know that the conferences are making money and they're getting fat and TV ratings are fine. But, I think the only real change we're ever going to get in the BCS is if a mid-major like TCU or Boise State somehow slips into the title game and enough happens for that to happen. Then the BCS conferences will say, oh, yeah, we need a playoff now. And I think that's the only way it's going to happen.
But the whole system is set up to prevent that from happening. That's why you have the WAC conference out there trying to hire a public relations firm to lobby to get the WAC champion a chance to play in the BCS championship game, and it should never come to that. The games ought to be decided on the field. The national championship ought to be decided on the field. The times when the teams go head-to-head and the players block and tackle each other, that should matter more than Jerry Palm.
Well, Jerry Palm doesn't have a vote. He just analyzes.
Yeah, but everybody talks to him. He's the expert. And the reason he's the expert is because he's a math geek that's figured out the formula. And that's what's wrong with college football.
If only we could settle it here, guys. All right, I know John's thoughts on this, but I have to ask anyway. We're still awaiting word on whether LeGarrette Blount is going to be back with the Ducks. If and when the suspended UO running back returns, does it help or hurt Oregon?
It depends what you mean help or hurt. Does it help them on the field? Sure. I think LeGarrette Blount gives them a nice change of pace as a third down back. Does it help them in the locker room? I don't think so. I think there's some division on this team. I think there's some guys, if we were being real, if we had an honest vote from this team on who wanted them back, I'd sure be curious to see what that percentage is. I don't think that LeGarrette Blount has helped them throughout this season, and I don't think that Chip Kelly bringing him back is a wise decision. But I think you're 7-0 without him. I think it would take a lot of stones just to stand pat and say, hey, look, we're going to go with the guys that have been here and have been productive. LaMichael James, Kenyon Barner, who is the change of pace guy right now. I'd love to see the Ducks finish the season without LeGarrette Blount on the field.
I don't think it really matters because I think, even if he comes back, he's not going to play much. They might use him in short yardage situations. They might use him on special teams. So I don't think it's really a football decision at all. I think here what we have is Chip Kelly made a courageous decision to change his mind, which wasn't easy to do. He took a lot of flack from people, including you, John, by doing that. And what he's trying to do is get the young man a chance to rescue his life and not be defined by one bad decision. And I think all evidence that we have, and we don't have all the evidence, but what we can see is he's doing that. He's gone out and he's talked to at-risk kids. He's going to class. He's going to practice, and he's being the dummy back that the varsity defense gets to beat up on. So I think, as far as we can tell, LeGarrette Blount has done everything you could ask him to do. And I think, why not bring him back to the team? Now, Is he going to play a lot? I don't think so. LaMichael James is too good, and the offense is rolling with LaMichael James there. So I think if LeGarrette Blount comes back, he's going to be a situational guy at best.
I think it becomes a football decision because Chip Kelly's job is head football coach. It's not life counselor for LeGarrette Blount. He doesn't owe LeGarrette Blount anything. I think it is a privilege to play football at Oregon. And I think you really do risk team chemistry, momentum, distraction by bringing him back. And I think Kelly's done a smart thing this week. And I've talked to Chip Kelly about this. I don't think he's a bad guy for changing his mind. I disagree with the decision. But I think he's done a smart thing this week and not pushing to bring LeGarrette back too soon. He said yesterday that if he wanted LeGarrette Blount to play against Stanford, he would have pushed for on Monday and Tuesday for this to happen. So I think he's taking his time. I think he recognizes that the football team has to come in front of the guy who put himself first against Boise State.
I disagree totally that Chip Kelly's job is not to be a counselor and an advisor and a life coach for these guys.
Not these guys. When he goes
into a living room and he talks to Mrs. Blount, he says that he wants her to come play for him. He is promising her that he will see that her son gets an education and that he improves as a football player and a human being.
I think he's done all three of those
That's the promise that he makes.
But he doesn't need football for that.
How do you know?
Why does he need football? You think he's going to be homeless and toothless with a sign on the side of the freeway if he doesn't get football?
I don't know Blount's specific situation. I know there's way too many college football players who define themselves as football players first and college students second. And if there wasn't the option of playing college football, that many of these guys wouldn't be there.
I'm impressed that he stuck around after the initial suspension because I thought he'd be gone in 3 days. But he stuck around and he stuck with the scout team. I think that's productive. I think that's evolution. I'm not a big believer that LeGarrette Blount has totally changed his from that guy who went sideways, the first game of the season in 7 or 8 weeks.
He made one mistake. It just happened to be on national TV, and it happened to be the Oregon coach's first game. It happened to be the Oregon athletic director's first game. It happened to be the Oregon University president's first game. It happened to be the Pac-10 commissioner's first game, and that's why they came down on him. And
he made one mistake.
I think Chip Kelly realized that later, when he thought about it, that it was too harsh. I applaud him for that.
It's his third suspension. He got kicked out of the first practice. His one mistake was punching a guy, then shoving a teammate, punching a teammate, and getting dragged out of the stadium. That's not one mistake. That's a guy who's got a lot of growing up to do.
I don't think the other problems he had were physical beating on people. I think they were being late to practice and missing class time and study tables. And he's a college kid. That happens. What's happened now is that he's shown that he has grown from it. And then I think since he's grown from it and he's taking care of business, why not let him back on the field?
I think he's grown from it. Why not leave him in practice where he has shown that he has grown from it? Let him be around the team. Let him keep his scholarship. Let him graduate. He's going to go to the NFL. Richie Incognito didn't need Oregon to get to the NFL. LeGarrette Blount doesn't need Chip Kelly or the University of Oregon to get to the NFL.
He doesn't need it, but why not let him play?
Chip Kelly's doing, but I think it's the wrong thing. He shows some stones, but it's the wrong decision.
Spirited discussion, guys.
Sure.
Let's talk about the game that's happening this weekend. Oregon at Stanford. A lot of people, the Ducks are going to have to contend with that power running game. A lot of people are wondering whether it's a potential letdown for Oregon. What do you guys think? How's this one going to play out?
I think Oregon wins big. I think Stanford may keep it close for a while, but Stanford just doesn't have the horses on defense to match up with Oregon's offense. I think Oregon could play poorly. I think it could be a bad game for Oregon. I think they could make a ton of mistakes. That might make the margin of victory a little less, but I think Oregon wins by 3 touchdowns or more.
I think Oregon wins all 4 of the next 4 games if they approach with the same focus and the intensity that they had against USC. That was their Super Bowl. If they can harness that week to week, like Chip Kelly professes that he wants to do as he's playing one game at a time, I don't think anybody beats Oregon the rest of the way. But I do worry going to Stanford on the road. They've got Toby Gerhart. They have the potential to keep the ball away from the Oregon offense. I think this game's much closer than Ken thinks. And my initial inclination is to say on the road in the wake of USC, if they're not totally focused, I have this game as a nail-biter. But I think Oregon wins.
All right, let's talk about the other game in the Bay Area this weekend. Oregon State at Cal, where they have been very successful the last several years. But this is definitely a different Cal team than the one that we saw a few weeks ago that lost big to Oregon and lost big to USC. Kevin Riley has said that he's not shaving that beard until they lose. Is he shaving this weekend, or What's going to happen in that game, guys?
I think he's growing. I think neither one of these teams plays great defense. Both of these teams can move the ball on offense. There's going to be a lot of points scored. Kevin Riley hasn't shown me anything again in the state of Oregon. Oregon State's won 4 in a row at Cal. I talked to Mike Riley today. He normally plays it very close to the vest. He's saying, I think we're going to move the ball. I think we're going to score points. He puts it all on the defense. If they can stop or slow down Cal, I think they're going to be fine. I think they win a high-scoring game.
It pains me to say this. I agree with a lot of what John says. I think Cal's going to win. I do agree that it'll be a high-scoring game, that both teams will move the ball, that both teams will score. But the Oregon defense I've seen, I don't think is capable of stopping Cal. There's too many weapons. You got Jacquizz Best, who's arguably one of the top 5 backs in the country. You got Riley, who's coming on, playing against an Oregon State secondary that has not been, frankly, very impressive. A very weak UCLA offense almost pulled the game out in the 4th quarter against that Oregon State defense. The Beavers get no pass rush. The secondary is repeatedly being burned by big plays. I think it's a high-scoring game, but I think Cal wins.
Best is a little banged up coming back from that concussion. Does that play a factor, guys?
Absolutely. I mean,
I don't think so.
I think he's one of the best backs in the country, and he's banged up. Yeah, that's a factor, but I don't think it's a difference maker. To me, the difference is Sean Canfield. I think he's had success against bad defenses. He struggles when he gets against an attacking good defense. I don't think Cal's good enough defensively to slow Sean Canfield down, and I think the Team Rodgers does what it's always done. They'll put up 30-plus points, and Cal will be right there. I think it's 35-28 Oregon State.
If Best can't play, Shane Vereen can. Shane Vereen's pretty damn good. I don't think Cal's going to fall off on offense, whether Best plays or not.
All right, speaking of running backs, something I want to ask you guys about. We've got 2 really good, small, young running backs in this state. They're both among the nation's leading rushers right now. Jacquizz Rodgers and LaMichael James. If you had to take one for your backfield, who do you take and why?
Quiz to me. I mean, he's 500-plus carries in his college career without a fumble. He just shows up. Everybody's gearing for him early in the season, late in the season. He still gets his 100 yards. He scores touchdowns. He runs tough inside and outside. Now he's added another dimension. He's catching the ball out of the backfield. I'll take Quiz. LaMichael James is a great back, but if you look at the freshman of the year last year, offensive player of the year in the conference, I'll take that guy.
I love LaMichael James. I think he's really good. He's got an extra gear that a lot of guys don't have. That said, I'll take Quiz too. You're talking about a guy that's the focus of Oregon State's offense. James is just a part of it. Actually, Masoli, I think, is the focus of the offense, and a lot of what James gets comes off of decisions that Masoli makes with the ball. Quiz is doing it all himself. He's setting up blocks. He's making his offensive line look better than it is. Like John said, he's developed another dimension. He's actually become a very good offensive threat as a pass receiver. He can block. I think he's the whole package. I really like Jacquizz Rodgers.
Okay, that said, all 3 of those guys that we've just mentioned, Rodgers, James, Masoli, they're all starting to get a little bit of Heisman talk, although they're all on the outside looking in. Do you guys see any of those 3 guys emerging in the next few weeks as being a real contender in that race?
Masoli could if Oregon continues to win, but I mean, you don't go to Oregon to win a Heisman. I mean, if you want to win a Heisman Trophy, you go to USC. And it's like the BCS system. It's a screwed up system in the way the voters are voting. And a guy from Oklahoma has a better chance. Guy from Florida has a better chance than any of those guys. And Jacquizz Rodgers, had he gone to Texas, sure, he'd have a legitimate shot to win a Heisman.
Yeah, Quiz's biggest problem right now is Oregon State hasn't won enough. I mean, they're not in the top 25. They're not in anybody's discussion of what the big game of the week is unless they're playing SC or they're playing the Ducks. So that's going to hurt him. The thing is, the Heisman Trophy race this year is as spread out as I can ever remember. There is not a leading candidate. And so it's a perfect chance for a dark horse, say Jeremiah Masoli, to maybe Ouija his way in. Now, that said, Masoli's got to continually be good. He's got to be at his top form every week, and the Ducks have to keep winning. So if he can do those things, he's got an outside chance, depending on what happens elsewhere. I'd say the favorite right now is Colt McCoy.
But you're right. I think Oregon has to win. They have to win all 4 games for that to happen.
Yeah, and they can't just win. Masoli's got to be the reason they won.
All right, quick little rapid-fire thing I got going this week. So it's yes or November. In other words, yes or not quite sure, going to have to wait to see what happens in November to be able to tell me. So Oregon will go 3-0 in November. Yes or November?
Yes.
November. I think the game with Arizona is a much more difficult game than a lot of other people think. I love Arizona's speed on defense. What they're doing offensively is very tough to stop, and it's a tough preparation. It's a spread like what Oregon has, except it's primarily a throwing spread, very similar to what Texas Tech does. Nobody else in the Pac-10 runs it. It's going to be a 1-week prep. I think that game is going to be really tough. It's in Tucson. I'll circle that one and say November. I'm not saying Oregon's not going to win the game, but I think it's going to be very tough, and that could be the game that if Oregon loses the game,
yes or November? You got a yes or November?
Well, he said if November is, you're not sure,
then
and that's what I'm saying.
So I get a chance to wait. I thought we had to be decisive here on this show.
Are you going? Are you going?
I'm saying yes.
Are you going to Tucson for that game?
I'm saying I don't know.
I thought we had to be decisive on it.
Yes. Yes, I say yes, and here's why I think Oregon's going to win. I'm watching a team that is playing with rare focus. I think what Chip Kelly's done since week 1 is brilliant. I think this team really is buying into the we're just playing this week's game. Normally, I think it's rhetoric, but I think that for some reason, some way, Chip Kelly's been able to capture it. I think they will compartmentalize these 3 games, and I think that they're good enough to beat any of the 4 teams that are left on their schedule.
I think you can say all those things about Arizona. I mean, Arizona's lost twice. One was to Iowa, which is at Iowa. Iowa's unbeaten. And the other is one of probably the freakiest play this season in college football, a pass interception that probably should have been called an incomplete pass. So I think Arizona's really good. I think Nick Foles, their quarterback, is really good. I think their offensive system is really good. I think their defense is underrated. I'm not saying Oregon won't win the game, but I think it's going to be a struggle, and it's a game the Ducks very easily could lose.
LeGarrette Blount will score a touchdown this regular season.
Yes.
Yes. Probably against the Beavers.
Oregon will win the Civil War.
Yes.
Yes.
The Ducks will wind up in the Rose Bowl or better.
Yes.
I'll say November. I'm waiting to see what happens in that Arizona game.
The Beavers will finish the regular season ranked in the top 25.
Yes. I think if you look at Oregon State's losses this season, I mean, I think they're good losses. The loss to USC, loss to Cincinnati. I think, Arizona's their other loss. And other than that, I think they've taken care of business. I do think that they are right around number 20 as you look at the top teams in the country.
I say November. If they lose to Cal, which I think could happen, and if they lose to the Ducks, which I think will happen, then I don't think they're ranked.
All right, final note before I let you guys go. The biggest game nationally this week, it's number 9 LSU at number 3 Alabama. Who you guys got?
I got LSU because I want to see the BCS system implode. I want to see Armageddon up on top. So I'll go with LSU for no other reason than I'd like to see chaos.
Boy, John's got what I want to happen. What I think will happen is Bama will win.
All right, guys. Thanks as always. Thanks for joining us, and look for us next week. It's College Football Insiders.